Hello and welcome to Open Dialogue right here on Meet Me at the Movies. So glad you could join us today. We're very happy to have Simon West here with us. I'm Noel T Manning II, and we just appreciate the opportunities to interview some amazing filmmakers and appreciate the audience who decides to take the time out of their day to watch these and engage in these as well. Simon, you have been involved in filmmaking for such a long time, and the range of films. And I got to tell you, I go back and think about Con Air. I think about Laura Croft. I even think about producing a TV series like The Human Target, one of my favorite TV series that didn't last. My wife and I love that
No,
series, and I actually own the series as well. And I go back to that from time and time again. And The
thank you.
Expendables 2. There's just so many films. The Mechanic. So much of what you've been involved in. When I think about the action, I think about the energy, I think about the excitement. Here we are looking at Skyfire. Man, a lot of that same kind of energy and excitement and enthusiasm. I was telling Emma, who set this up beforehand, that I grew up loving disaster films. It's part of my DNA. I go back and think about watching films like The Towering Inferno in the theater, and the movie Earthquake, and so many of those films are part of what I love. So I want to ask you the question about disaster films. Or disaster films something that you remember watching and engaging in and loving? Because this film truly is a disaster film with a heart as well.
Yes, well, I mean, like you, I remember some of the first films I saw at the movie theater were the classic 70s disaster movies like Towering Inferno. But I also, like the Poseidon Adventure, had a big effect on me. And when you're a young kid and you're watching those big epic movies and all the inventive stuff that goes into those things of how you put people in a pickle and how do they get out of it, and that's what I ended up doing for a living. And so I think back to things like that film. Okay, you got an environment that you have to get your heroes from one end to the other, whether it's a plane crashing or a boat sinking or whatever, and you have to think, okay, I have to give the audience 10 great sequences and things to figure out,
Right.
how our heroes are going to get away with them, and it's a real fun, and it's a sort of a joy for me to do that. And even things like working at the stunts, I get to work with people who have done a lot of this. In fact, the Poseidon Adventure, there's that classic shot of the guy we all remember falling down into the light, when the boat
Right.
flips over. It's like the shot, remember. Well, I got to work, that guy, that stuntman, I got to work with his son,
Wow.
who was a classic stuntman, and his son is now a stuntman. So I work with these guys that have been doing it for 3 or 4 generations. I think his grandfather doubled Paul Newman in Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. So
Wow.
I become like a film fan as well, because I just want to hear stories about the films they've worked on and the great stunts they've done. And so for me, these films are just as fun to work on as they are to watch, because I get to really play in the sandbox and think up all these what I would want to see for the audience to have fun with.
Well, this film, Skyfire, definitely is that. It is fun from really from the start, and you are drawn in to the action. You're drawn into the characters, and I love the backstories that come out of this as well. I watched this with my wife, who is also a huge disaster fan, and so when I told her about this film, and I said, "You want to watch it with me?" She's like, "Well, yeah,
Mhm.
of course I do." So we just sat, and right off the bat, you realize, okay, this is a film that has multiple languages in it. It's Chinese, and there's some English language as well. Talk about directing. Now, do you speak Chinese? I guess is my first question relating to
Well, I wouldn't say I speak Chinese. I can now direct in Chinese, which is slightly different. Which is like I've shot all over the world, and I always try and learn the main directing phrases. When you're on set, like faster, slower. Everyone lean to the left. Everyone lean to the right.
Right?
Things which I can do in Chinese now. So I say "yi er san zuo, yi er san yo." So it's like everyone
Right.
lean to the left, everyone lean to the right. So it was a challenge because it was shot in both Chinese and English, and so a lot of the scenes were actually shot in both languages.
Yeah.
And then I chose in the edit which language would end up in the film, because the cast were almost all bilingual.
Okay.
So I could shoot the scene first in Chinese, I mean in English, and then understand how the scene worked out and blocked, and then we would just shoot it again in Chinese. And that's when I was sort of flying, by the seat of my pants kind of thing, because
Yeah.
I knew what was going on, but I couldn't quite, get every nuance of the dialogue. So I had a very, very good translator working very closely with me, who wasn't really translating what was said. It was more like the intonation and the inference and the emotional side. So they could say, oh, the actor read that line a little bit more aggressively than the last time, and this take two was more sympathetic. Do you want him to be more sympathetic or more strong? And so I could make those decisions based on the feedback I got from my translator, who was also a filmmaker. So they were sort of a creative influence as well. So it was, and it's fun for me because I have shot a lot. So anytime there's something new to try, I'll try it, because it makes the day more challenging and more interesting. So it was great to work in two languages, especially a language that was so different from anything I could understand or speak. It was fascinating.
So when you got into the editing room, what decisions did you make? Did you have that translator in there in the editing room as well, so you would know?
I didn't have that same translator, but everything that was downloaded into the editing suite was on. I had the soundtrack on two different tracks, so I could click between English and Chinese at any time. And I also had a Chinese-speaking assistant editor who could check that I wasn't making any kind of technical mistakes, like cutting a word in half, or or joining two phrases together that don't sound correct in grammatically. So I was checking those things. But sometimes some scenes played better in English and sometimes in Chinese, and especially with humor, I actually ended up having actually two different edits, because the version that was released in China had different takes on some of the humorous scenes than the English speaking ones, because humor is so different in every country. And I found out that rapidly when I was shooting, that talking to the actors who were bilingual, I was saying, okay, well, this is how I see this scene, and it's a big scary scene, but there's a humor running through it, so I think you should do this deadpan, because it'd be ironic. And of course that was totally mystifying to them, because they said, well, in Chinese we don't have deadpan humor. So I had to explain what it was, and so they explained to me how they would play it in Chinese, and it would be completely different. It would be played at a much higher level of emotion.
Wow.
And people in China would find that funny, but in the West we would find deadpan humor. So I had to sort of adjust like that. So it's interesting culturally, the difference.
I think that's the beauty of collaborating, is being able to actively listen and then take that and move that forward. And it sounds like you did that quite a bit on this film, Skyfire.
Yeah, definitely. And we had 17 nationalities on the crew.
Wow.
So we were in a Malaysian island, very much like the one depicted in the film, and we were all, because we were in the Pacific, basically, we drew from all over, from Australia, from Canada, from Hollywood, from China, Indonesia, everywhere. So we had 17 different nationalities on the set, and so it was a very multicultural experience.
Yeah, the location was quite magnificent, and you were able to capture that quite well. And some of the shots in particular, I think about those underwater scenes, they must have been incredible to have to shoot something like that. Share a little bit, if you would, about those scenes, and maybe any other scene that you felt sticks with you and remains with you about, wow, I'm so glad we caught that one.
Well, during the research for the film, you have to say, what does lava do? What do volcanoes do? I have to go on a sort of a 6-month course of becoming a volcanologist, because I want to be an expert so I can show every aspect of what the possible disaster scenarios are. And the interaction of lava and water is one of the most fascinating, in as much as we all know it sort of solidifies, but it also gives off poisonous gases, which are great device for putting people in jeopardy, and things explode underwater, and so I knew I wanted an underwater sequence, so I planned an extensive sequence, and what I didn't know is when my actress turned up for the shoot. I planned sort of 6 days underwater. She said she couldn't swim, and so let alone swimming underwater. So we had to go on a rapid course of teaching her to swim, and in literally 2 weeks, she became like an expert underwater, diver. And they're down there deep in the water, and of course they don't have air tanks on their back, so they're relying on divers to come in and give them air every 30 seconds, and it's quite a terrifying situation to be in, for any person or actor, let alone one who's only just learned to swim.
Yeah.
So, but the sequence, I'm very proud of it. It was, very beautiful underwater. It was in a romantic scene to start with, an underwater
Yes.
romantic scene that, soon turns into a disaster scene. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's one of, it starts off with a lot of heart, and that's what I think with any action film or disaster film, you've got to make the audience care for the people before you then put them in jeopardy. So you want them to survive.
And I'm glad you mentioned the word heart because I felt that this was a film that had a lot of heart. And I think you're right. Any good disaster film has got to have that at the core. And I think about family is so strong in this one, and trying to reconnect and finding a way to find that family that you lost or that you let get away or that you pushed away. What is it about family that you think was so important to be able to share in this particular film?
Well, family is one of the strongest bonds you can have, and it's definitely a way to keep you emotionally interested, because everyone's had a family, whether good or bad, or and whether you're estranged from your family or you're still connected with your family. Everyone understands the emotional heart of a family, whether it's good or bad, and so that's a great area to tell a story within. And that it's the classic generational thing: father daughter,
Yeah.
those issues, mother daughter. um, and so everybody can relate in a way, even if you haven't had the greatest experience with a family. You can relate to what an emotional trauma it can be when a family member is in danger. And so um, that's one of the keys I always think, is try and get the emotional backbone there, and then I can have fun with the roller coaster ride, because
Right.
once the audience cares about everybody and is invested, they'll come along with you. Right? If you just do nonstop action and you don't really care about anybody, it really doesn't land with the audience, and they'll reject it really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I love the cast that you chose for this. I love the effects, and the score as well. There was so many just great things. My wife kept talking about the score of this film, how much she loved this score as well. Anything else you would like to share about any of the crew that really made this film happen?
Well, as I said, it was an international crew, so we brought expertise from all over the world. And what's interesting about a film crew is and I have been shot in hundreds of countries around the world, is they all seem to be the same. They're the same type of people that are on the crew. So I can spot, no matter what country I can land first, I can spot which part of the crew is in the is in the camera department, which the guys with the green hair are obviously in art department, guys with the leather jackets are in the camera department. I can spot who's in what. The sort of guy with the glasses and the headphones on is sound. And whether they're Malaysian, Australian, Japanese, or Russian, they're all the same sort of people. So that's what's nice. It's a sort of an international family. So you can quickly get a working relationship, because we all, even if we don't speak the same language, we definitely speak the same, film language, and everybody understands what you mean. So that's what I like the most about the family aspect of filmmaking. And these times it's hard, because we're in film, we're used to having a family of like 200 or 300 people
Right.
together for like a year,
Yeah.
and you get very close and you're very in each other's world, and that's very different at the moment. And so that's what we miss the most.
Yeah. Well, Simon West, our guest right here on Open Dialogue, right here on Meet Me at the Movies. And any final thoughts you want to share about Skyfire that you would love our audience to know?
Well, I just yeah, look out. I think for one of my favorite things I do is I try to give the volcano a character. So the sound effects on the volcano are actually made by animals. Because to me, the
Wow.
volcano was like a monster. It's a monster movie,
Yeah.
and so you try and pick out as many of the animal sounds of every time the volcano appears. It's a slightly different animal coming to get you.
Wow. Okay. I'm looking forward to the director's commentary now, just so I can figure out which animals there are. Simon
Yeah,
West,
we had a lot
thank
of fun.
thank you so much for taking the time to be with us right here on Open Dialogue, right here on Meet Me at the Movies. And thank you very, very much. Until next time, I'm Noel T. Manning the second, and that is a wrap.
Thanks, Noel.
Simon, thanks. Have a great one. Appreciate it. And
Yeah,